What's up, guys, and welcome to NFL Week 3 player pool. Going to be a massive slate this week for DraftKings. We got 13 games on the main slate. There's going to be several games that stand out that you're going to need to know in order to make money this week, and I'm going to dig into them right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom with Seekr Sports, and you're watching Player Pool. I'm going to be breaking down the main slate for DraftKings lineups. We're going to build some lineups on this show and go through the slate game by game. We got 13 games on the slate. It's a massive slate, but there's a few games that you're going to need to know if you want to make any sort of money this week. You're going to need to know how to play these games. And I'm going to dig into that in a second. Make sure to hit the like button and get me to 50 likes so I can put out my favorite picks as we get closer to lock. Been hitting on the showdown slates, especially with the low-owned captain plays, just picking out those low-owned captains that have matchup advantages. And that's what we do on this show, too. I look for matchup advantages in individual games on this massive slate. And also, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm about 35 subscribers off of hitting 1,900. So if you can subscribe, that would help me out big time. And you're going to want to subscribe so you get all the access to all the game scripts that I put out where I analyze single game slates on DraftKings and FanDuel. And you're going to want to subscribe to get access to a beta preview of my secret weapon that I'm unveiling in a couple weeks. That's going to help you guys out with your research as well. It's going to help all of us out with our research. So you're going to want to be subscribed in order to get access to that free beta preview. All right, guys, let's dig into this slate. We got a big one, like I said, on DraftKings. As you can see on my screen, I've got a couple sponsors. You can go to BetMGM and use the promo code HEATER1500 to get up to $1,500 risk-free on your first bet. So make sure to take advantage of that. And also on Underdog, if you use the promo code Seekr, you're going to get $50 free in funds when you play your first $5 play over there. So you're going to get $50 free in playing funds once you do that. So you're going to want to check out Underdog and use the promo code Seekr. All right, guys, let's dig into this slate. Going to go by game in this one. And first game we got is Houston at Jacksonville. Houston at Jacksonville is looking at a 44.5 point total with the 2.5 point spread in favor of Jacksonville in this one. This is going to be an interesting one. Jacksonville, their offense has not been clicking. They've been in favorable matchups so far, but they haven't really shown anything. Brian Thomas was looking frustrated in the game last week. Not sure if that's a Liam Cohen thing or a quarterback thing. Trevor Lawrence, he's been struggling for the past few years now, but it's just at a point, I think, in Jacksonville where Trevor Lawrence has just got to get his stuff together and start showing some competence in being a quarterback in order to to justify the monster contract that he signed recently. So if I'm looking at this game, I see the running back for Jacksonville, Travis Etienne, has the best matchup. The Texans are allowing 24.6 DraftKings points a game to the running back position so far. That's going to set Travis Etienne up. He's a guy that we can leave in our player pool this week. The passing game is going to struggle likely against Houston. They got a pretty good pass defense, obviously with Derek Stingley in there. The slot position for Jacksonville is going to be the one that has the biggest advantage in this matchup. That's going to be likely Travis Hunter for the most part, although there's a bunch of injuries to the Jacksonville secondary that's going to require probably Travis Hunter to play a decent amount on the defensive side this week. But he's also got some matchup advantages on the in the slot position. So let's take a look real quick at some of these injuries that I'm talking about, we got Jalen McLeod on IR. We got Caleb Ransaw on IR. He's a free safety. Not seeing, well, it looks like some of the guys that were questionable are no longer on the injury report. So that's actually good news for Travis Hunter in the slot. It means that he'll get more probably offensive snaps in this one. We got on the offense, we're looking at Ezra Cleveland is questionable on the offensive line, and that left guard is already having depth issues with a couple guys out already. Other than that, it's looking like not too much else going on with the injuries over here. We can take a look at Houston real quick. All right, so Houston, Tank Dell obviously is still out. He's probably going to miss most, if not all, of the season. Justin Watson's on IR for receivers. Looks like Christian Kirk will be back this week. Cade Stover on IR. We thought that might help Dalton Schultz out last week, but he didn't do anything for us. If we're looking at the defense, we got Jalen Reed and Jalen Smith on IR. We got Jimmy Ward is out this week. Just a bunch of injuries in the secondary, and we're looking at some injuries on the offensive line or the defensive line as well. So not a lot more injuries on Houston than we have on Jacksonville. But the main guys over in Houston look to be okay, so that's going to still make Brian Thomas's matchup difficult in this one. As you can see, he's struggled. He's only had 9 DraftKings points in each of the first 2 games, which is not what we're used to seeing out of Brian Thomas, and not the reason why we drafted him in the first round. As far as Christian Kirk, we are looking at. Jacksonville's had a pretty good slot defense. They've only allowed 7.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot. So not a whole lot of interest in Christian Kirk coming off, I believe, a hamstring injury. And now he's going to be facing a tough defense. And as far as other guys on this game, I'm not really interested in any more of the wide receivers, not really interested in the tight ends. Neither of them have a very good matchup. This is a difficult matchup for tight ends too. So not a whole lot in this game to like. I like Hunter and ETN basically on the Houston side. I'm not really seeing a whole lot except for actually Nico Collins with the Jacksonville defense allowing 32.9 DraftKings points a game to the wide receiver position. That's going to set up Nico Collins. He hasn't broke out yet this season, but this could definitely be the spot where we see something out of him against this Jacksonville defense. So keep that in mind. Also, division rivals. With these division rivals, we always see potential shootouts, or it could be either a shootout or a low scoring game. And we have definitely have some explosive weapons on both sides that we could see come alive in this one. So Nico Collins, keep him on your player pool this week. All right, let's go to Atlanta versus Carolina. So with Atlanta versus Carolina, let's see. Atlanta versus Carolina, we're looking at a 43.5 point total with Atlanta as 5.5 point favorites in this one. This is a game that shot out in week, I believe, 18 of last year. We can kind of take a look at the box score from that one. Let's see. I'll go over to try to get over to last year and see what the box score looked like. Well, it looks like I lost access to. Oh no, here it is. All right, I'm going to share this tab instead. All right, let's look at week 18 of last year, and we can take a look at what that box score looked like for this game between Atlanta and Carolina. All right, so Bryce Young, he started to look competent towards the end of last season, and this is one of the games that he looked impressive in. He had 36 DraftKings points. Miles Sanders had a big game. The running back had a big game in that one too. Let's see. Did he rush in touchdowns? Yeah, it looks like he got Bryce Young had 2 rushing touchdowns in that one. So there wasn't really like any wide receivers that he carried with him. On the Atlanta side, though, we saw Michael Penix had a big game too. Bijan Robinson, Drake London with 40 DraftKings points, Bijan with 31, Michael Penix with 25. Having that double stack, triple stack would have been huge. Trying to see what the actual score of the game was. It's just a box score. It doesn't have the actual score of the game, but it was a high scoring game. So, this is a matchup that has potential to go off. If we're looking at what these teams have done so far this season, the Carolina Panthers have been weakest against wideouts. They've been giving up 25.6 DraftKings points a game. That's where we're going to have interest in Drake London. He hasn't really done anything so far this season. He's running a lot of his routes in the slot too this year, so keep that in mind with Drake London. But he's been more versatile this year. But we also got Darnell Mooney. Mooney came back last week, only ended up with 4 DraftKings points. He had 4 targets, but Mooney's a guy too that can potentially exploit this Carolina defense against wide receivers. As far as the slot, Carolina's been much better against the slot, only allowing 5.2 DraftKings points a game. They play Atlanta plays man coverage. Let's see. Atlanta plays man coverage at 57.8% of the time. That might be advantageous for Tet McMillan. So let's go over to Tet McMillan. McMillan, 19 points in week 2, 11.8 in week 1. McMillan's been pretty good so far this season. He's been proven himself as a good draft pick. Let's see. Trying to give a idea if he's got any matchup specific. Well, no, I don't have any data on him man versus zone, but he's been getting 21% of the targets so far through 2 weeks. So Tet McMillan is a guy that we're going to want to consider as a run back if we decide to stack these Atlanta guys. Carolina historically has been bad against the run. This year, they've been allowing 21.8 DraftKings points to running backs. They've been allowing 18.9 DraftKings points to the tight end position, which is one of the highest amounts in the league, top 10 amount. That's going to make Kyle Pitts interesting in addition to Bijan Robinson. You can see Bijan, he's been a monster in the first couple weeks. If we go over and look at Kyle Pitts too, Pitts has been looking more lively than we've seen him in a couple years. 5 targets last week, 8 targets the week before that. They didn't need him too much last week. They won 22-6 against Minnesota. Minnesota looked terrible last week, and Bijan was the guy that they were leaning on last week. Bijan with that 22 DraftKings points. So he had 143 rushing yards last week and 25 receiving yards. So Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Tet McMillan are the guys I'd be interested in here. If you want to play it for a high-scoring game, you could. I would probably go with that Michael Penix side and add, like Mooney or Drake London in on that. They were the other guys that you could potentially have. Actually, I'm sorry, Tet McMillan's the other guy that you have interested in. Like I said, like 25.6 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Let's see. Otherwise, Atlanta's defense has been pretty good. They've been solid this year. All right, let's go over to Green Bay versus Cleveland. Green Bay versus Cleveland, we're looking at a 41.5 point total in this one. We got Green Bay as 7.5 point favorites. Green Bay's defense has been on fire this season. Signing Micah Parsons was huge for them. And, he's already been paying off dividends. We should see it all year. Parsons is on a mission this year. I made a bet for the Packers versus the Chargers in the Super Bowl. I thought that was going to be much better odds on that one, but apparently I'm probably a week late in making that bet because now they're becoming two of the favorites to win their conference. But you can still get if you parlay it on FanDuel and use winning their divisions, and then on top of that winning their conferences for each of those teams, then you can get plus 4,000 as opposed to plus 3,300 on FanDuel. So it gives you a little bit extra boost there. But check that out. I think Green Bay they're just going to have a monster year this year. Their offense is competent, and their defense now looks unstoppable. So it's going to be a rough matchup for Cleveland. The only guys on Cleveland who are going to have any sort of a matchup advantage are going to be the tight ends, where Green Bay has been allowing 17 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. We can kind of illustrate that. Let's see what they've been doing on a weekly basis over here to tight ends. So Washington at Green Bay last week, we saw Zach Ertz score 18 DraftKings points. And in week 1, Dallas, let's go to Green Bay. Detroit at Green Bay last week, we saw Sam Laporta have 13.9 DraftKings points. So keep that in mind this week when we're looking at tight ends. Njoku and Fannin Jr. are guys that we want to consider. They're both relatively cheap. Fannin Jr. has been interesting, getting a decent amount of targets. He had 9 targets in week 1, 5 in week 2. So he's a rookie tight end on the Browns, and he's been looking decent so far. Taking a lot of work away from Njoku. I thought Njoku would have that connection with Joe Flacco again, but Flacco to Njoku hasn't been working so far this season. 6 targets for 7 DraftKings points and 5 targets for 8 DraftKings points. But regardless of that, they have a tough matchup against the let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, they have the good matchup. The tough matchup is for Tucker Kraft against Cleveland. Tucker Kraft against Cleveland is going to have a tougher matchup. He had a monster game last week, though. He had 27.4 DraftKings points, but Cleveland is only allowing 8.2 DraftKings points a game to tight end positions. Cleveland's defense has been weakest against wideouts. They've been allowing 31.3 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. So if you wanted to consider any of these guys over on the Packers, maybe we see Golden have a breakout week. He hasn't done anything yet. We could see Dubs. Dubs, he's been getting a decent amount of the snaps, and he had 5 targets last week and 4 targets the week before that. I think Dubs has actually been getting the second most snaps on the team behind Tucker Kraft. So we're looking at, like Dubs as having a potentially decent week this week, and Golden could potentially have a breakout week if they decide to throw to him. Dontavian Wicks, there's an interesting stat I saw about Wicks this week. Now, according to Rich Rebar, Wicks has been targeted on 25.8% of his routes to open the season, and he's been targeted on 33.3% of his career routes against man coverage, compared to 21.3 on zone routes. If we're looking at the type of defense that he's facing this week, Cleveland runs 60% of their defense as man coverage. So that's going to set up Wicks to have a nice potential game in this one. And he's only at 3,700. So keep that in mind with Wicks. Last week, he had 6 targets. He had 2 targets the week before that. And we got Jaden Reed out. Jaden Reed is out this week. And Christian Watson obviously still out. So, don't be surprised if we see Wicks outperform that $3,700 salary that he's got there. And, he could potentially get us a good game this week. Let's see. If we're looking at the next, there's rain considerations in Cleveland tomorrow, so keep that in mind. Cincinnati versus Minnesota. We've seen Minnesota defense is looking okay this year, but their offense has been pretty terrible under J.J. McCarthy. He had a phantom injury pop up this week, and now we're going to get to see Carson Wentz, another one of these veteran quarterbacks that comes into a great system. He's dirt cheap at $4K. Carson Wentz, former MVP frontrunner in the year that the Eagles won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. So that was a huge year for Carson Wentz. And, he really hasn't been in, under as good a coaching staff as he was that year until now. And now he gets to, he gets a quarterback whisperer in his head coach that's going to, potentially put him in a position to succeed in this offense. We saw it with Sam Darnold last year, and now we're going to see Wentz get an opportunity. He faces off against Cincinnati, whose defense has been terrible for the past couple years. They fired their defensive coordinator last year, but it's really the problem with Cincinnati is their owner just being cheap. And, it's caused all sorts of problems and strife with their players, trying to sign draft picks in the preseason, just all sorts of unnecessary headaches because their owners just notoriously terrible. So if you're looking at Minnesota, they've been allowing 25.8, or Cincinnati's been allowing 25.8 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. That's going to set up Justin Jefferson for a big game. They've been allowing also 29.4 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, and that's going to be significant because Aaron Jones is out. That's going to leave Jordan Mason as the main cog in this run game for Minnesota. He's not going to have a whole lot of competition for touches, and it's just going to set him up nicely to have a big game against Cincinnati, who's also missing their quarterback. They're missing Joe Burrow, who is on IR. Looks like he's going to be out until the end of the season, basically. We get Jake Browning back. He's a guy, he scored 20 DraftKings points last week. He's had a decent history. He's got great weapons. A couple years ago when he had to sub in for Joe Burrow, last time Joe Burrow had a season-ending injury, Jake Browning did really good. He's got the weapons, obviously, in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And, don't write off Browning, but the problem this week is that he's facing off against Minnesota, and Minnesota's been pretty good against quarterbacks. They're only allowing 14.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So, we're looking at a difficult matchup for Browning this week, but we want to keep him in mind for future weeks. Wentz, on the other hand, is in a great situation, and look for Wentz to surprise people this week. Get an idea of Wentz's ownership. Let's find out what kind of ownership Wentz is looking at this week. I have a feeling that he's going to be high owned. I have not looked at ownership yet so far this week, but I mean the matchup is a pretty good matchup. Let's see if we're going to ownership. Carson Wentz is looking at around the third highest owned quarterback on the slate, which makes sense at that cheap price tag. There's another cheap quarterback that's going to be standing out. He's about the same ownership, and I'll get into him in a minute. Make sure to hit that like button, give me to 50 likes to put out my favorite picks in the comment section later on, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Help me get to 1,900 subscribers. I only need about 30 more to get there, so I appreciate the help on that. Let's see, moving on. Mason, I mentioned. Jefferson is who I would like to stack with Wentz. Let me get an idea what Jefferson's ownership is this week. Jefferson's coming in at a muted ownership. He's only about 13%. So it looks like Wentz is going to be popular this week, and he might not be popular as in popular stacking with Jefferson this week. Tight end position. Let's see. No, nothing really stands out, but Hawkinson might be interesting this week. Cincinnati has been pretty bad against the tight end the last 2 years. They've given up 12.5 DraftKings points per game so far this season. And let's see. Wentz, according to Rich Rebar, has targeted his tight ends at a 30% clip. So the third highest rate among quarterbacks. That's going to be interesting for TJ Hawkinson this week if you're looking to potentially double stack, if you want to play this game as a shootout, or if you're looking for like a stacking partner and you don't want to go with Jefferson, you can keep Hawkinson in your player pool too. He hasn't done much this year, but he was dealing with a terrible quarterback. Let's be honest. Like JJ McCarthy had one good half, somehow won the NFC Player of the Week, and then he came back down to earth in week 2, and now he's got a quote unquote injury that's keeping him out. So very much struggling, and now Hawkinson gets a potentially competent quarterback and a veteran working in that system. Let's look at Pittsburgh versus New England. Pittsburgh versus New England, we have got a 44.5 point total with Pittsburgh as 1.5 point favorites in this one. They are playing in New England. As far as the matchups in this one, let's take a look and see what kind of matchups we got. We got a good matchup on both sides for wide receivers. Let's take a look and see where New England's health is in their secondary. All right, if we're looking at New England, Christian Gonzalez is still out. Got some depth issues there. Got some depth issues on their offensive line as well. Other than that, like not too much else. Let's go to Pittsburgh, take a look at their injury report. Looking at a little bit of depth issues on the offensive line. As far as the defense, though, we got a bunch of injuries here on Pittsburgh's defense. We got Alex Highsmith is out. We got the starting safety, Deshaun Elliott, is out. We got Joey Porter out. Some depth at nickelback, but they still got Jalen Ramsey in there. Corey Trice Jr. is out. Back up to Darius Slay. We got Malik Harrison out. All sorts of problems still with this Pittsburgh defense, which is going to set up Drake May at home to have a decent game. I believe they're playing in New England. Yeah. All right, so they're playing in New England, so that's going to set up Drake May. He had 26 DraftKings points last week, 16.7 in week 1. So two decent performances. The Steelers have been giving up 23.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. We got a 1.5 point spread here. Aaron Rodgers obviously could come alive in this one. The Patriots are allowing 19 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. Both sides have been struggling in the run game. and the opposing defenses are only allowing like a middling 22 DraftKings points each. But the wideouts have been getting 29 points for both of these defenses. So both these offenses have good matchups for wideouts. As far as the slot, New England's been allowing 12.3 DraftKings points a game, and Pittsburgh's been allowing 10 DraftKings points a game. Teams have been targeting the slot at a 30% clip against New England. And other than that, like both these teams are pretty much even on across the board, like with what they're allowing to these offenses, and also the amount of man and zone that they play. Pittsburgh plays 45% man coverage, or New England does, and Pittsburgh plays 44%. So both middling there, but that's interesting. If we're looking at some of these wideouts that we'd be interested in this situation, I think Metcalf will be interesting this week. Butte, what's he been doing? He got one target only last week. I had him as one of my picks last week. He only had one target, but fortunately that was a touchdown. He had 8 targets in week 1, 6 receptions, 19 DraftKings points in week 1. With this being a competitive, potentially competitive game, I wouldn't be surprised to see any one of these receivers have a decent game. If we're looking at Demario Douglas, he only had one target last week too. Kind of a weird distribution of targets last week. Looks like Diggs had 5 targets. But, I'd be interested in, if we're looking at that amount of man coverage. Let's see. Patriots have been allowing 11 yards per target without Gonzalez on the field, which is interesting. Metcalf is being targeted a lot shorter routes this year too. So, like this might be more interesting for Calvin Austin this week against New England. 4 targets last week, 6 targets in week 1. You saw that 17-point game out of him. If I was going to stack Rodgers, I'd probably want to stack him with 2 guys. I'd probably go Metcalf and Austin. Roman Wilson still has not done much. I remember Rodgers talking about how he needed to step up in the preseason. So, we're not really seeing much out of him. But Calvin Austin could be interesting at 4K this week. And on the New England side, Booty and Diggs, probably the more interesting guys this week. As far as the matchup, only 25% target rate to slot receivers against Pittsburgh's D. So Demario Douglas might not be the best guy, but I'd probably go Drake May to one receiving target. I don't think I'd double stack him and then maybe run it back with Calvin Austin or DK Metcalf or something like that. I think that'd be an interesting way to stack up this game. As far as the running backs, though, like I said, I'm not really interested in any of these running backs. We got plenty of running backs on a 13-game slate. We got the Rams versus Philly as our next game. In this game, we are looking at a 44.5-point total. Not a good matchup for quarterbacks in this one. Philly's only allowing 15.5 DraftKings points, and the Rams are only allowing 9.8 DraftKings points to quarterbacks so far this season. Wideouts have been doing decent against Philly this year. They lost half their secondary, and they had to move around a bunch of pieces, but they're allowing 25 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. They play man coverage at a 50% clip. So man coverage for, let's see, man coverage for the Rams. Let's see what Adams does against man coverage. Yeah, I think that Adams is an interesting one. He had a decent game against the Eagles last week too, or not last week, against the Tennessee Titans last week. 25.6 DraftKings points for Devontae Adams. He's an elite route runner. And then we got Nakua. Nakua is just like he's a beast. He got 27.6 DraftKings points last week, 26 in week 1. Either one of these guys could be a target for us this week against the Eagles, giving up that many DraftKings points to wideouts. The first week, I thought that Nakua was going to be the main slot receiver. It turned out that I thought Adams was going to be the main slot receiver. Turned out it was Nakua. But slots are only getting 2.7 DraftKings points a game by Philly. It used to be Philly's big weak spot, but now their weak spot is in the wideouts, or defending wideouts. And Philly, like the Rams D has just been on fire this year. So not much I like on the Philly side. Sorry, I had my wife coming home and opening that garage door. So not a whole lot in this game to like, but it is interesting what the Eagles are giving up to wideouts. So keep that in mind with Nakua and Adams as potential one-offs. If I'm looking at the Jets and Tampa Bay, Jets and Tampa Bay, we're looking at a 44.5 point total with Tampa Bay 6.5 point favorites in this one. The Jets, the Bucks have been, both these teams have been giving up 19.5 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They've also been weak against running backs, with the Jets giving up 24.3 DraftKings points and Tampa Bay giving up 24.1. Both have been strong against wideouts, but the Jets have been weak against slot, and that's where Ibuka has been running most of his routes in the slot. Tampa Bay's defense has been middling against the slot, so I'm not really interested there necessarily. But Ibuka is going to have a interesting matchup this week. And teams have been targeting the slot at a 55% clip against the Jets. Keep in mind too, Mike Evans will probably be shadowed by Sauce Gardner for what that's worth. Tight ends, the Jets have been giving up 15.7 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position as well. So that's going to set up Otten as a potential guy to target. Baker Mayfield's pretty aggressive regardless of the matchup. So, Mayfield, I think, is in play basically every week. I mean, he's still doing well against like tough defenses. Atlanta and Houston both have tough defenses, and Mayfield had 22 against Atlanta. He put up 20 against Houston, and now he faces a Jets defense that has been struggling so far. Looks like Fields is officially out, so we got Tyrod Taylor going to be starting for us. Baker doesn't necessarily need the other team to be competing either to have a big game. So if Tyrod doesn't have a good game, that's not really going to it'll impact the ceiling of Mayfield, but he could still easily put up 20 DraftKings points even in a non-competitive game. Bucky Irving 18 points last week, 14 in week 1. He had the 18 DraftKings points against Houston and 14 against Atlanta. Both of those are, I believe, pretty tough run defenses. Houston's is weaker. Let's see what Atlanta's been doing. Atlanta's got a pretty tough run defense, though, and he had a good week against them a couple weeks ago. So Bucky Irving, I think he's going to be in play, especially as 6.5 point favorites in this one. And are they playing at home? Yeah, they're playing at home on top of it. So, Bucky Irving, a guy that we can leave in our player pool. If I was going to stack Baker, I might stack him with Bucky Irving and Emeka Egbuka, or the tight end in Cade Otton. I think both those guys are going to be in play. Otton has not done a whole lot, though, so far this season. He had 4 targets last week, only 5 DraftKings points, and 3 targets in week 1. So keep that in mind with Otton, but he does have an easy matchup this week. Indy versus Tennessee. Daniel Jones has been on a tear so far this season. 25 DraftKings points last week, 29.4. I talked about it a little bit in the best ball season with Daniel Jones. Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Colts, brought him in. He was a former offensive coordinator for the Eagles, so he was familiar with Daniel Jones, playing him a bunch of times, and he chose to bring him in to the Colts. He knew his game, and probably knew that he would fit the system pretty well. And we're finding out Daniel Jones, a highly drafted player a few years back, ends up having a couple really good weeks to start his tenure over at the Colts. So Daniel Jones, don't be surprised to see him have a decent year this year, and potentially a decent week. Let's take a look at what the matchup looks like for him. Let's see the Colts versus Tennessee, 43.5 point total, very low total there. Indy's 4.5 point favorites in this one. They're playing in Tennessee. Division rivalry. This is a game that could go over that total. The Colts have been allowing only 14 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback, and the same on the other side. The Titans have been allowing 13.6. As far as running backs, Indy's got a good running back matchup. So maybe this is a game where they get away from Jones and go a little bit more towards Taylor. Taylor, 32 points last week and 12.8 in week 1. And now he gets this cushy matchup against this weak Tennessee run defense. Slot receivers are the guys that we want to target on against Tennessee's defense. They've been getting 15 DraftKings points a game versus this defense, and that would be Downs. So Downs has not done too much. He got 8 targets last week, though. This could be a breakout week for Downs if you wanted to start Daniel Jones. I don't like the matchup for Jones, but I do like the matchup for Downs. So you could see like a Taylor and Downs potentially if you wanted to group those guys together. And let's see what the Colts have been doing specifically against these running back or against these quarterbacks. Week 1. Versus Miami. Tua only had 7 DraftKings points against them. So that's what's probably bringing that average down. Let's go to week 2 and see how the quarterback did against Indy. Bo Nix had 21.24 DraftKings points. So, if you think that Cam Ward can break out of his slump here and have his first good game, like he's looked like a competent quarterback, so that's the good thing about him. But he hasn't had a breakout game yet. but you never know. It could come against Indy this week. If it does, and that pushes Daniel Jones, then you can potentially stack Daniel Jones in this game with maybe Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor, or you could just go Jonathan Taylor and Downs in this one, and then just fade the Titans. Let's see. Let's get a good look at some of these other games here. We're moving on to. Oh, by the way, Pollard, 9.2 DraftKings points and 8.9. He hasn't been doing too good. What's his matchup like? Bad matchup too. Indy's only beginning up 17.9 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, so not too interested there. Washington versus Las Vegas. They're playing in Washington, dealing with injuries on this one too. Daniels is out, so we got Marcus Mariota, another former number 1 draft pick a few years back. Mariota is going to be interesting. Both the times that he came in for Washington last year, like he ended up having some pretty decent games. Let me get a look at that. We'll go to Pro Football Reference for this one. Going to type in Marcus Mariota. All right, let's take a look at what he did last year, because he had a couple games where he filled in for Jaden Daniels. So one of those games, he didn't even play the full game. He played like a half a game. He had 205 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Second game, he had 161 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, and he added a rushing touchdown too. So those were like not even full games for Marcus Mariota, and he crushed it. And now he gets to face off against Las Vegas. Get an idea of this matchup here. Looking at a 44.5 point total with Washington as 3-point favorites in this one. With the matchup, Vegas has been giving up 17.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They've been giving up 25 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 18 DraftKings points a game to the slot. So they've been a target for sure for wide receivers versus Las Vegas. As far as Washington's been weakest against tight end. So we're looking at a situation here where Vegas is going to get to do what they want and target, Bowers as much as they want with this good matchup. Bowers was hurt last week. He still had 8 targets, even being hurt. If we're looking at the quarterbacks, obviously Mariota. If we're going to stack him, I think Debo and McLaurin are in play this week. They are mainly facing zone, so that would tend to favor Debo more, I believe. 79% zone coverage. Let's see. When Mariota played last time, though, he was targeting Mariota was targeting McLaurin pretty heavily. So, Debo and McLaurin are definitely in play this week. We also got Bill in play this week because Eckler went out with an Achilles tear, and he's done for the season. Maybe his career. We're looking at Vegas allowing only 14.7 DraftKings points to. 13.2 DraftKings points to the running back position. So, I could tend to target more the passing game in this one, but, you can keep Krosky Merritt in mind too if you think that it's going to be a game that gets away from the Raiders in this one. Genty has not done anything for us. if you drafted Genti in the first round, then you're not very happy right now. 7.4 DraftKings points last week, 12 in week 1. I'm trying to see who else has a potentially good matchup. 49% of the targets against the Raiders have been to the slot receivers. So that's going to set up Jacoby Myers as well. So I like Bowers, and I like potentially Jacoby Myers. Bowers is at 6K. He could be a double tight end week. Whereas Myers is 5,600. So both those guys are pretty cheap when you consider the potential of Bowers in the flex. Denver versus the Chargers. This is a game that could actually shoot out. The Chargers have been very pass heavy this season, and it's not something that was necessarily expected, but their run game just hasn't done anything, and they're facing a tough run defense in Denver. Denver's only been giving up 18.8 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. On the other side, the Chargers have been even better, only giving up 11.9. Quarterbacks have a rough matchup in this one. Denver's been giving up 12.7, and the Chargers have been giving up 16.1. But both of these guys, this is a matchup where these guys could definitely go off. They all have weapons. Let's see. Chargers versus Broncos 2024. Let's see what the scores look like last year. Okay, so last year, Chargers versus Broncos, we had a 34 versus 27 in favor of the Chargers on December 19th. And 23-16 in favor of the Chargers on October 13th. So the Chargers beat them both times. How did Justin Herbert do against them? Let's see. Let's go over to our box scores. Go to 2024 again. I'm going to go to DraftKings scoring. I think we're closer to the end of the season on this, December 19th. Probably be week 16 or so. Denver versus the Chargers. Bo Nix had 21 DraftKings points against the Chargers in December, and Herbert had 21 DraftKings points. McConkey had 14 in that game. No one really had a big game for receivers on the Denver side. But, the way that these quarterbacks can shoot out, and this year we got an even stronger receiving core for Justin Herbert. If we're looking at the receivers, we got Keenan Allen. We can do a check and see Keenan Allen's history versus the Broncos. Let's take a look here. First, the Broncos, Keenan Allen. 12 targets, 6 receptions, 68 yards his last game against them. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 102 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 4 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown. 7 receptions, 85 yards. Look at all these targets when Keenan Allen was on the team facing the Broncos. 12, 11, 9, 10, 12, 6, 6, 7, 12, 7, 6. So Herbert was not afraid to go to Allen, and Quentin Johnson is the one who's going to be facing Surtain most likely as the wideout, the main wideout for the Chargers. The wideouts have been only getting 16.5 DraftKings points against Denver. Slots have been doing terrible against Denver too. They've only been giving up 6.4 DraftKings points. But if I wanted to play Herbert in this one, I would stack him with Keenan Allen most likely. based on, how many times he's targeted him in the past. But, overall, just not a very good matchup on paper, but division rivals, they're going to know each other enough to exploit each other's defenses. So, I wouldn't shy away from them either. New Orleans versus Seattle. This is another one that's interesting. Clint Kubiak is the Seattle offensive coordinator, and he was the coordinator for New Orleans last year. So that's interesting. New Orleans has a very weak defense now. I'm not interested in either of these quarterbacks really, but Sam Darnold could have a decent matchup. We're looking at a 41.5 point total, which stinks. With Seattle 7.5 point favorites, so it's not setting up to be a very good game environment for Sam Darnold. But Seattle has been giving up, or New Orleans has been giving up 20 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. Both these teams have been weak against running backs. The Seahawks have been giving up 28.6 DraftKings points, and New Orleans has been giving up 25. That's good for Kamara and Kenneth Walker. Charbonnet is doubtful, so if that leaves Walker, McIntosh is also on IR. So they got depth issues at the running back position, which could be great for Kenneth Walker. Could finally see him be able to break out of his well, he had 21.8 DraftKings points. I was going to say break out of his slump, but he had a decent week last week. 105 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, Kenneth Walker is definitely in play. I wonder how much ownership he's going to have this week. Let's see. He's got to be high owned. Yeah, 36% ownership for Kenneth Walker this week. Kamara on the other side has a decent matchup too. Kamara, 17 DraftKings points and 13 DraftKings points, heavily used not heavily used, but used in the passing game. I think he was only targeted. His targets have come down this year, but the offensive coordinator or the head coach of the Saints has been pretty good at keeping the teams competitive. Kellen Moore, like he's also, coming off of a Super Bowl winning year where he ran the offense for the Eagles, and he might be able to figure out a way to keep this game competitive and keep maybe Seattle's passing game in play. The slots have only been getting 6.1 DraftKings points a game versus New Orleans. Fortunately for Jackson Smith and Jigba, we have seen Cooper Kupp join the team and take most of that slot work away. So Smith and Jigba is running more out wide. So that's going to make him interesting this week. If we wanted to stack Darnold with somebody, tight ends, both sides have a good matchup. That's more significant for Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, 15.9 and 15.6. So he's had 2 good weeks. Look at all the targets he's getting, 12 and 8 and 9. So Juwan Johnson, good matchup, and he's getting a lot of usage with Chris Olave. Olave had 10 targets and 12 targets. So he's getting a ton of targets. So Olave is in play too. Even though the matchup isn't great, but just on a volume perspective. So keep him in mind too. But, not looking to game stack this, maybe some skinny stacks, but, otherwise that game's not looking too great. And it's going to be a rain game. Looking at another rain game with Dallas and Chicago. Now, this is going to be the game of the week for DFS. This is the one that you want to figure out how to play it. We're looking at a monster total with 50.5 points with a very close spread on top of it, with Chicago as 1.5 point favorites in this one, playing in Chicago. And we're looking at Eberflus as the defensive coordinator of the Bears, facing off against the team that just let him go in Chicago. So he knows the weaknesses of Caleb Williams. And it's also a revenge game for Eberflus in this one. On the other side, the head coach of the Bears, obviously coming over from Detroit, so he would have plenty of experience scheming against Eberflus. So we got Eberflus versus Ben Johnson, and they've faced each other a whole bunch in the past, and now they get a rematch at different teams, with Dallas taking on Chicago. So Dak Prescott, here we'll go over the the matchups first. Both teams allowing 27.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. Looking at the running backs, Chicago's been giving up 28.6 DraftKings points a game to running backs. That's good for Javonte Williams. Dallas has been giving up 30.1 to wideouts. I think Odunze would benefit from that, but I think also DJ Moore. Maybe Moore would benefit more than Odunze in this matchup, but they're using Moore as kind of a out of the backfield, catches a lot and stuff like that. So I think either or of those guys could go off in this one. For slots, though, slots have a good matchup too, because Dallas has been giving up 14.6 to the slot. So both those wide receivers are going to be in play. The only one who doesn't have a great matchup is the tight end. Dallas has only been giving up 10 DraftKings points a game. On the other side, the Bears have been giving up 23.1 to the slot. That's great for CeeDee Lamb. They've been better against wideouts, only giving up 17.9. But if we're looking at the injury report here, let's see. We're looking at the Bears' depth. Jalen Johnson is on IR. Kyler Gordon is out. That's going to be even better for. We got a lot of depth on the nickelback, so that's going to be even better for CeeDee Lamb. With no Jalen Johnson, that's going to put Pickens in play too. As far as the linebackers, we're missing TJ Edwards and Ogbenjima. Both those guys are out, and that's going to be good for Javonte too. So the Dallas, you can start a whole bunch of Dallas guys. You could have a Dallas onslaught. You could run it back with Moore or Odunze. You could do it the opposite way too. I think Caleb Williams is the highest owned quarterback on the slate this week. Get an idea of his ownership. Actually, you know what? Since we're over here first, let's look at the injuries on Dallas, because the Cowboys have some injuries in the secondary too. Trayvon Diggs is questionable. Deron Bland is out. This is where that weakness against the slot is going to come into play. He was a nickel corner. Just a bunch of secondary and linebacker issues here for the depth. You got some depth issues on the offensive line too. So yeah, definitely some injuries to take advantage of in this game. This game is going to be popular, but you're going to have to overstack it to try to get different. And there's plenty of guys to overstack it with, which is the good news. And on a 13-game slate, if none of these other games shoot out, which, none of these other games really stand out. We got too many injuries to stud players and too many good matchups or good defensive matchups. So it's going to be hard for a team to stand out this week or a game to stand out this week. So that's going to make this game very interesting. We'll start there when we build our lineups. For our final game, we got Arizona versus San Francisco. And for this game, we're looking at a 44.5-point total with San Francisco as 2.5-point favorites. The weak spot versus San Francisco versus Arizona is going to be the slot. So I believe Juwan Jennings is running his routes out of the slot. Let me figure that out real quick. Yeah, Juwan Jennings has primarily been their slot receiver. And he is questionable this week too. Let's see what his injury status is. We've got a lot of injuries that we're going to need to keep tabs on this week. Let's take a look at San Francisco because this is an interesting game too. Shanahan has not done well against Arizona. On top of it, we'll take a look at their recent matchups in a minute here. We got a bunch of injuries on the offensive line of San Francisco. Looking at some receiver depth issues. Look at this receiver. Their receivers are just decimated. Juwan Jennings is still questionable. Purdy might play this week. He's questionable. As far as the defense, not as Teron Jackson, not as serious on the defense with the injuries. Let's look at the Cardinals. All right, Cardinals, we're looking at some depth issues on the offensive line. A whole bunch of guys are out on the defense, and we're looking at Will Johnson is doubtful. Garrett Williams is on IR. Max Melton is questionable. Bunch of guys on IR, like I said. Had a whole bunch of injuries on the defensive line, defensive tackle. Calais Campbell is the last man standing for the left defensive tackle. So all sorts of injuries on that Arizona defense. Now let's go real quick and look at those matchups between Arizona and San Francisco. So we're looking at opponent. All right, so Arizona lost, let's see, lost 23-24. Then they won 45-29. They won 35-16, 38-13, and 38-10. But there's no way of seeing what Shanahan's let me see what Shanahan's record is against them. Recently, they've been great against them, so that might be a moot point. Cardinals. Let's see, Shanahan record versus Cardinals. All right, so he's won 4 out of the last 5 games, but he has a losing record overall. But like I said, that really doesn't even matter if they've won 4 out of the last 5 games like that. So that's kind of a moot point. I'm not really interested in that stat. Kyler Murray. Let's see how he's had some pretty good games against San Francisco, I believe. Let's see, fantasy points. Let's try to get the last 6 games here. All right, so I'm going to show you guys stat muse for this one. So we're looking at last year 27.9 DraftKings points and 25.1. Prior year, looks like he's been injured on a lot of times that the team's actually faced them. 15, 13, 16, but then he had 27, 26, 23. So the most recent games are the ones that matter the most because that's when they had their current coaching staff. And you're looking at 27.9 and 25 against San Francisco in those ones. So he's done pretty good recently against San Francisco. Division rivalry. Like I said, the player that has the biggest advantage is the slot receivers against San Francisco. They've been giving up 16.1 DraftKings points to the slot. They've been better against wideouts, only giving up 15.7. Versus the Cardinals, the slot also has the advantage, 15.1. That's where Juwan Jennings I was talking about. Tight end also has good matchup against Arizona. The backup tight end for the Cardinals, for the 49ers, that has been getting the most action is Tongas. 5 targets last week, 3 targets the week before that, 10 and 7 DraftKings points. Tongas is 2,900. Farrell is the other one, 9.5 DraftKings points last week and 1.4 the week before that. So Farrell also, potentially in play. Let's look at the snap counts with these guys, see if we can find a cheap tight end option for us against this weak Arizona defense. If you guys know my show, this is where we like to pick out those low-owned guys that go off, and everybody was like, what the hell happened there? Let's see. Let's go over to I gotta find my page here. Looking for my snap count page that I usually use. All right, here we go. Let's look at. All right, it's going to make me sign in. Hang on a second here, guys. All right, let's look at tight end here. Tight end, we're going to sort it by team. We're going to go to San Francisco. Tongas had 79% of the snaps last week versus 58% for Farrell. I guess they used a lot of 2 tight end sets last week, but Tongas probably the more interesting guy if he's going to be playing that much more than Farrell. So keep that in mind. Tongas at 2,900. Look for him to have a decent week against Arizona this week. And if it's Farrell, it's Farrell. But, if I was going to have to guess one of these guys, I'd probably go with Tongas. And what else do we have? That's about it for this game. 44.5 point total, though. Close spread. A lot of these games are close spreads. So, any one of these 44.5 point totals could end up going above that total. It's just a matter of which one you want to pick. We got Cincy versus Minnesota with a 3-point spread. We got Houston, Jacksonville with a 2.5 point spread. We got Vegas versus Washington with a 3-point spread. Rams, Eagles, I'm not really interested in that game, but it's got a 3.5-point spread. Pittsburgh, New England, 1.5 points. Denver Chargers, 2.5 points with that nice 45.5-point total. And Dallas, Chicago, 1.5 points. So if we can get muted ownership on Denver Chargers, that'd be a game for us to stack as an alternative to Dallas, Chicago. But let's go ahead and start a build with Dallas and Chicago. So before I get into it, make sure to hit that like button, give me the 50 likes so I can put my favorite picks in the comments section later on, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. 35 subscribers off of 1,900. So help me get there by the end of the week. And you want to subscribe anyways to get access to the free beta of my secret weapon, which is going to be coming out in a couple weeks. So don't be slacking on that subscribe button, guys. All right, let's get Dak Prescott in there. Let's put Lamb, and let's get Ferguson in there with him. And let's run it back with Odunze. You know what? DJ Moore hasn't broke out yet. Let's look at DJ Moore versus Chicago. No, we can't do DJ Moore versus Chicago. Yeah, no, it's nothing we can do to get a good look at that previous matchup. If we want to overstack this, maybe we want to put in Javonte Williams too. And let's just stack the crap out of this game. All right, so other players that we like, Bijan, let's get him in there. Let's look at defense. Find our cheapest defense that we like. Cheapest defense. It's not a whole lot of cheap defenses that are looking good this week. Houston, Jacksonville might be interesting. God, there's no real defenses that I like this week. San Francisco, I don't like them. Yeah, that's going to be a tough one to find a cheap defense. So if we don't like any of them, then that means let's just go with a cheap one that looks interesting. Let's go with let's just go with New England. All right, so we got 5,100 left per guy. Let's go to wide receivers. Drake London's pretty cheap at $6K for all the work that he's getting. But Ted McMillan was the guy that we like in that game. Let's get McMillan in there at 5,900. That's pretty cheap. And then 4,300 for our flex spot. It gives us options like Luther Burden would be interesting if we wanted to throw him in there. Zach Ertz had talked about the tight end having a good spot over there. There's not a lot of good cheap guys. That's all those running backs. Let's skip through all these running backs. Calvin Austin, Troy Franklin. We've seen the uptick in his usage. If we think that Chargers Denver game is going to shoot out a little bit. Kyle Pitts, talked him up. Hawkinson. Mentioned him. Oh, let's get Wicks. First of all, let's put Odunze in the flex. If we wanted to use Wicks, that would leave us with 600. We could take out that Patriots defense and upgrade if we wanted to. Maybe we want to put in the Falcons D or, like the Eagles, something like that. It leaves us with a little bit more options on that defense if we go with Wicks in there for that salary relief. But we can get like a decent stack between that Dallas and Chicago game in there. So something to keep in mind. Let's clear that out. Let's go with one of these cheap quarterbacks. Gonna go with, let's go with the Wentz build. Wentz to Jefferson was the obvious one. Gonna want a run back in this one too. We go with Higgins for some salary relief. If we're looking at running backs, actually, you know what? For that one to go off, we probably want Chase to be having a big game for Jefferson and Wentz to be firing. Let's go to running back. Let's get Bijan in there again. Bijan. And let's go with Javonte Williams. Let's get a little bit different in that Dallas game with how we stack it. And let's put Odunze. He's still pretty cheap at 5,300. For tight end, let's go with Hawkinson. Let's give Wentz that double stack there. And both those guys have good matchups against Cincy. Defense, let's go back to that Patriots D. Gives us 4,700 in the flex. That leaves us with, options. Keenan Allen, good option against Denver. We saw how many times he gets targeted against Denver. We got Shaheed in there. You know what? Like, if we wanted to put in Juwan Johnson. Now, I heard JM talking about this on his show, JM to Win. He likes to put in Juwan Johnson and Olave as kind of a pairing because between the two of them, they get about 21 targets a game so far. So you're paying a very cheap price for 21 targets in a game. So if you put those guys in there, maybe we take Chase out. Let's get Odunze out on this one. Let's put in Higgins instead of Chase to go as our run back. Leaves us with 6,700. We can get Smith and Jigba in there. If we wanted to swap out Bijan for Walker, we could get rid of Higgins. We could put Chase back in there. We got that New Orleans to Seattle stack. We got we got options for a Chicago run back. So let's go with Moore. We could put DJ Moore in there, or if we wanted to Dunze, but let's put Odunze in there. I think we save money on him. If we put Odunze in there, that leaves us with 1,500 still, where we could upgrade somewhere. Seattle. Did I put Smith and Jigba in there? No, I didn't. What's Smith and Jigba's price? Let's get Smith and Jigba in there. Let's get maybe take Walker out. Leaves us with 6,100. I mean, we could get ETN, Kenneth Walker. We got J.K. Dobbins as an option. That's a revenge game for Dobbins against the Chargers. Not a good matchup, though. Then you got Mason as an option. He's going to be popular. That would help us out with, or not help us out, but that'd be a part of our Minnesota stack there to give us more correlation. Or you could stick with Kenneth Walker and just have two Seattle guys to stack with those two New Orleans guys. So that's an interesting route to go. What was the other one? Washington. All right, let's see what we can do with Washington. Let's go with Mariota, who's been good in the opportunities that he's had in the system. His favorite target is McLaurin, and McLaurin has yet to break out. So let's see if he does it for us. And let's get Brock Bowers in there. I don't think Brock Bowers is going to have a ton of ownership, but let me make sure on that. Let's check the ownership on tight ends. Trey McBride's going to be the highest. Brock Bowers is down to under 10%, so that's great for us. Brock Bowers at 10, like under 10% there. We got a cheap quarterback, so it's not killing us either. Let's try Bijan and a lot of running backs that I like this week. Irving, I like. Javonte. That's our way to get different, really, I think, with Dallas. That Dallas game is getting Javonte Williams in there, so I'm going to put him in there. Let's get Smith and Jigba in again. Let's get that Patriots D in there again. 5,500 per guy. If you wanted to get a Chicago guy, get a piece of that Chicago stack. Let's go with Odunze again. You could go DJ Moore if you wanted to. 5,800. Leaves us with Kenneth Walker as an option. I kind of like doing 3 running backs. But that's probably going to be a popular way to go. I think everybody's like just trying to jam in running backs this year. Ted McMillan is $100 off. If we put, he gives us a Bijan run back too. So let's get Odunze in that. Let's get McMillan in there. Who did I just take out? Someone at 5,300. Odunze. So if we put Odunze in there, let's take the Patriots defense out. Doesn't really matter. Like they were just a placeholder. You could put Tennessee in there and hope for Daniels to come down to earth this week. You got Cincinnati as an option. Not a great option. You got the let's see, Raiders versus the team that we're stacking. I don't hate the Rams defense this week, but that might be pushing it. But that's if you want to have Ted McMillan in your lineup. But those are your options at defense if you want to go that route. Obviously, you could swap out Tet for someone else. I like him because he correlates with Bijan. We got Dallas versus Chicago represented. We got the Vegas Washington stack with Mariota to McLaurin running it back with Bowers. So we got all sorts of correlation going on in this one. Really like the direction here. And it should be a good overall matchup. So yeah, make sure to hit that like button. Give me to 50 likes to put out my favorite picks in the comment section later on. And make sure to subscribe. Help me get to 1,900 subscribers. Going to be putting out a short Underdog video. So make sure to keep an eye out for that on the YouTube page. And I will see you guys next time.